an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Evolve, The Children of Divinity, Book 2, Chapters 1 through 4. In these chapters, well, our crew has a name, Pendragon, which feels very appropriate, being British. And overall, I'm really not sure where this book is going to head. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Heather for commissioning this episode. Heather's in the chat with me, and reminder, it was Heather's husband who wrote this book, Garth Reesby. Am I saying your last name right, Heather, by the way? So I did 4 chapters, which it says she says Reesby. Okay, gotcha. Garth Reesby. I did about 42 pages for this episode because I find that when I start a new book, I always tend to spend a lot more time theorizing on what's coming. And so I feel like it's better to begin a new book with slightly less pages to give myself a little extra room. So chapters 1 through 4 this time. We start off with Lily Stevens and her training, which I'm pretty excited about. I wasn't really, thinking about her being this directly involved this quickly. And I guess what I thought would happen is that once the announcement or the revelation day happened, that enough people with special abilities would begin to reveal themselves, that they'd have to set up a sort of intermediary facility to train people who have no experience at all. Because, we have Jordan, it was military. She was already out there following orders and commands. She had weapons training, all of this stuff. Lily didn't have any of it. So I'm a little bit surprised that she is being put in the same facility, given the same kinds of training. And it makes a lot of sense that she would look up to Jordan the way that she does, because there doesn't seem to be any other women other than the 2 of them. So you've got exactly one person who is not only the only woman, but the star of the crew as well. Yeah, that's going to have an effect. And I'm not sure that having Lily train with everybody else is a smart idea. I feel like this is, there should have been some other program to put her through before having her added to the rest of this group. I understand how intense her ability is and like why you would want her to be on this team, but I feel like there had to be some sort of middle ground that would be a little bit more practical here. And it turns out that Portsmouth, he is very protective of her. Is Portsmouth related to her dad? What exactly is his deal here? Or does he, there is something about his attitude with her that feels really specifically paternal. And I don't know if that's just supposed to be because of her age or if it's meant to be kind of a mystery. But it's really obvious that he wants to shield her from harm. Whereas every other woman, it's like he wanted to put them through as much pain as possible in order to drive them through, right? Like, is it, or do I have him mixed up with the other guy who was like really misogynistic? Heather says not at all. He's a bit like Wolverine, where he feels very paternal and protective towards these young women that wind up teamed with him. Okay, so I have him mixed up. I'm sorry. I have I don't know if it's because of the, like, structure of this group, but I have a hard time keeping characters, like, straight in my head for who is who. The only people that I'm always confident about are, like, Jordan and her sister, and Douglas and Brian. Briar, because his name is very distinctive and it's so similar to Brian's name. And then everybody else, and Dr. Linden and Dr. Spears, because they're doctors. Everybody else, I wind up getting a little bit like, wait, who is this again? And I don't really know why that keeps happening with me mentally. Who is the one that is so misogynistic that tried to basically make Jordan quit? Let's see. Portsmouth frowned as he placed Lily on the medical table. Portsmouth is the one that was being such a douche towards her. Oh, it is him. So I didn't get him mixed up. He feels very paternal and protective towards these young women that wind up teamed with him. But why was he... Why... That doesn't feel like what he is like, though. Where is this coming from? I don't feel like we've ever seen that before. I'm very confused by this then. Heather says it's because Lily is so much younger and doesn't have Jordan's confidence. I mean, I guess, but like, then don't put her in this program. I find this to be kind of weird. I'll be honest. I just don't, I feel like this guy who had so little patience for other women who were actually qualified trying to be part of this program, that he would unfairly target them for more difficult tasks than he would have given the men, to be suddenly so protective of Lily, it feels really off-brand to me. I don't know. Let's see. Heather says it wasn't his choice. This is actually discussed, I think, in the next batch of chapters. Okay. Because, yeah, he keeps on, like, trying to sort of assert to Jordan that it's her fault Lily is doing this because Lily is trying to emulate her. And again, of course she is. You know, like, Jordan's a badass, just first of all. She's the only woman here, again. And she's also, like, the one that was the sole visible woman in the whole bullshit of Revelation Day. And I feel like that also is a kind of reputation that is going to follow her forever. And we find out later that her code name is Viper. I always liked the name Viper, so I approve of that name for her. And Lily is, like, kind of taking offense to the assertion that she's trying to act like Jordan, which you would, you know, you want to be like somebody, but you don't want people to say that you're trying to be like somebody. It's always the sort of cyclical thing when you're attempting to find yourself as a teen, and you inevitably sort of imitate others at first. And eventually you begin to find your own style and figure out where you lie within all of that. But initially there's a lot of copying, and it's like, it can't be helped. You know, this is part of what I was talking about. If you want to tune into the book club, Unspoiled Book Club, or the Overdue show, I just covered Aragon with the boys from Overdue. And that was a major thing. That book is incredibly derivative. And it is because he was young when he wrote it. And unfortunately, it blew up because he was in a very privileged position. And I feel like it's not, it would have been better for him if that didn't happen, personally, I think. Because you can't help when you're that young pulling heavily from other stuff. And I just felt for Lily in this. Like, I know if I were in her shoes, I would absolutely be trying to copy Jordan. Are you kidding me? Like, no question. So let's see. Oh, here it is. Dr. Linden, it turns out that she has like a long cut from the back of her hand to the elbow. It's not even really that deep, but Portsmouth is really freaking out about it. He is acting like this is just an inexcusable oversight. I can't believe this happened. And it's just like, man, she got a slice on her arm. She'll be fine. Would you chill? You know, it's not like it got her in the forearm where it could have opened an artery or something. Just relax. And Lyndon basically paints over it with a synthetic skin that will eventually peel off as it begins to heal. So let's see. This isn't life-threatening. Take a step back, please, Lyndon replied and turned on the device. Portsmouth had an intense look of interest as he leaned towards the display. Sergeant. What? Last time I checked, back meant the same thing today as it did yesterday and the day before that. What you are doing is actually the opposite of taking a step back. I really like Lyndon. So at this point, Jordan asks what happened. You did. Excuse me? You happened, Jordan. Lily spent the last year trying to emulate your antics. All the flipping and jumping rubbish you do has gone to her head, and it's going to get her killed if she keeps it up. Bitch. What? Antics? Did you just say antics? Suck a dick. Suck several dicks. Like, antics. What are you talking? This bitch is responsible for the success of everything. And yeah, the secret's out, but those dudes were fucking transforming into shark men in the middle of the street. So I'm just really not on board with blaming her for that anymore. And also, as a woman, being told to be less good because of the result of its effect on people around you. It's a very common thing, being told to tone it down, be less. And him basically insinuating that Jordan should try to not be as good as she is due to this girl's taking it a certain way, it sat wrong with me. And I really was side-eyeing him for this a lot. The signs of hero worship had bloomed in Lily early on, and everyone on the team had seen it. That sort of thing was dangerous, so Jordan had acted to quash it quickly and made certain that Lily understood her own physical limits. It didn't surprise her at all that Lily was pushing them. That was just her nature, and it gave the young woman strength. I'm well aware of her limits, James, and I made certain that she understood the difference between training and practical application. Apparently, your lessons didn't stick. She tried to flip out of the way of a stun bolt in the playground and cut her arm on a piece of glass. I thought she was still doing low-risk runs. Portsmouth hesitated. Director McIntyre thought she needed to be given the chance to prove herself. She just wants to prove herself to you. So, what this comes down to is that she was given a run that was slightly outside of her ability level. And they knew that. And he didn't think it was a good idea either. But now he is trying to turn it into her problem again. So, let's see. And then she finishes with, she's trying to prove something to all of us. But McIntyre is right. She deserves the chance to show she's ready for the field. The world has changed and we need her. And at that, when she says it, she feels a pang. She had been the one to change it. No, she hadn't, though. She really hadn't. I just don't think she has. It keeps being stated as a fact that she's the one responsible for this, but she just wasn't. And that's all there is to it. The exposure of super beings had awakened all over the world a sense of freedom. Jordan had been the source of it. How? How? There were shark men in the street. I don't get this. It keeps just being laid at her feet. The dude transformed before she started doing anything. Like they were fighting, but I don't feel like she was doing anything bananas, no more so than actually literally transforming into another creature. Too many had chosen to express their newfound freedom by openly committing crimes. As a result, the team had been very busy, so McIntyre had ramped up the search for recruits and apparently accelerated Lily's training. So this comes up a little bit later again as well. When they're talking about what they're going to name the crew, is this concern about people like being afraid of people, of awakened people, of metahumans, and how carefully they need to name the crew in order to make sure that it's like a source of inspiration and of hope instead of being intimidating or something that inspires fear instead. And how they need to be like a representation of metahumans for good versus what people might be afraid of. The thing that I wish that he had done with this is give us more of an outside of this crew sense of what's going on out there. By that I mean like maybe if we saw some articles in the newspaper or like blog posts or, you know, if we heard about some news reports of things going wrong, if there was like a moment where maybe Jordan and Douglas go out for a drink at a pub and they hear people sharing gossip about the things that they've heard about metahumans or encounters that they've had with somebody who was like threatening them and it turned out that they were a metahuman using, you know, or somebody finding out that a close friend of theirs is a metahuman and not really like knowing how to process that. I would like more of an upfront, like front-loaded experience of what has changed since Revelation Day with a first-hand experience of it. Because otherwise, I'm just being told everything secondhand. And so the concern that everyone is having, which is logically understandable, doesn't feel immediate. There's just not a sense of urgency to it. It just seems very theoretical. I can be told it's happening, but I don't know how bad it is. I don't really have a good sense of what the discussion has been like. I'm just being told what the vague conversations are. And I have to assume that there are other people out there who are metahumans who are trying to do good. You know, just like I want more of a fleshing out of the outside world at this point. If we're doing a revelation, that needs to be, the outside world is now involved, and that needs to be pulled into this a little bit more. And it probably will be, but like I said, I want that more front-loaded because that seems to be what this book is going to be about. So I feel like it should start off with that kind of information and that kind of like immersion in the overall atmosphere of what the climate is at this time. So yeah, the team had been busy, so McIntyre had ramped up the search for recruits and apparently accelerated Lily's training. She's just a girl, Portsmouth said quietly. Jordan wanted to smile. She's a woman, Jordan countered. She's 20 now, an adult like me. You're different. How so? You turn off your emotions like a switch. She can't. She lets them control her. You've put all this empowered woman shite into her head, and it's going to get her killed. Jordan glanced at Portsmouth's hand and deliberately pushed it aside after pointedly staring into the older man's brown eyes. She had indeed told Lily she could do the job if she had the willpower to push on and the dedication to learn the skills. The same was true for anyone, man or woman. But Portsmouth's anger had unleashed his inner misogynist again. Maybe you should have told the director she wasn't ready. You are in charge of training. What makes you think I didn't? Oh, I'm certain you did. You just couldn't tell her no. And this is when they get interrupted by Chance. And I was like, Chance, don't interrupt. Like, I wanted to know how this conversation was going to go. I really wanted to hear him explain what was happening here. So they needle each other here for a little bit. And I love the fact that Lyndon gives Lily a lollipop after her examination. Oh, there's something about that. The fact that he thinks to do it and the fact that she takes it and is like, yeah, I'll have a lollipop. Fuck yeah. That just cracked me up. So Portsmouth like walks away, and Chase at one point says, you two should just have sex and be done with it. And I'm like, ew, Chance. No, stop. Ugh. Like, Portsmouth, there's no surer way to have him suddenly begin treating you like shit than to sleep with him. Because that's just like, that was one of the things that he said that women did in order to like ruin the team, was to sleep around. And I can just imagine, oh my God, what a horrible fallout there would be for that. While the year had seen improvement in the relationship between her and James Portsmouth, it was still adversarial and usually tense. Conversely, Portsmouth treated Lily like she was his own child, and Jordan thought he was unusually easy on her. Her own training had been grueling, and if Portsmouth had cared for her safety at all, she never saw it. So at this point, she puts her mask on, which she has like an official costume at this point, and it keeps being called a costume, which I sort of found interesting. It's not being called like, a utility suit or something like this. It's being called a costume. And she puts the mask on, which just adheres to her face by itself. And she says something to Chase about how he should come with her if he can be pried away from his girlfriend. So it turns out he is dating Reggie officially now. It's been a few months. And I love that there's a like comm inside of the costume. There's like a cellular link, and she calls Brian, and his first question is, are you wearing the mask and the boots? Brian, you. So then we go to Jill's POV, and she's with Brian. And it turns out, in true privileged fashion, Jill is going to be getting an internship with Dr. Spears because, and we know, like, really, it's because of what she is. But Dr. Spears has not let her know that. So as far as it looks like, it's because of her connection to Brian, and that Brian already knows Dr. Spears. And she is interested in doing like biology and genetic research. So she has, when I heard that they were going to visit Dr. Spears, my immediate reaction was like, is this a trap that he set up in order to get her in there? And it's still unclear exactly who initiated this. But I have to think that he knows what she is. If he doesn't, he's going to figure it out quick. I have to think there's some way that he can sense that sort of thing. I don't know. The fact that she's already awakened too. I mean, the experiments that he's been doing to try and get people to awaken, that was like them being infused with blood samples, right? Like he would take awakened people's, like, I can't remember how it was, but he was trying to get their genes to like map onto the DNA of regular humans, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe he was using his own blood? I don't know what the source was for it, now that I think about it. But Jill's safe from that kind of treatment, at least, because she's already awakened, unless he doesn't know and he just tries to do it anyway and finds out by accident. But I don't know how much Dr. Spears knows. It's unclear. Overall, though, I really, really like her entering into this after we, as readers, know that he is a bad guy. There are two ways you can handle things like this, right? You can have it be a shock that the man turns out to be a villain after he's been working with Jill most of the book. All of a sudden there's a big reveal, and that would certainly be effective. It's not like that wouldn't work. But there's a different sort of payoff when you do it this way, that there's a build of dread. There's also a question of, it's a bit of a mystery, wanting to know, like, what exactly is his angle here? What is it that he's trying to do? What does he want to get out of her? All of that, again, assuming that he knows what she is, which we don't know for sure. And I tend to be a bigger fan of dread than I am of, like, big reveals. Big reveals have their place. And there are times where you do a big reveal simply, oops, sorry if I hit my mic. I feel like I have something in my eye. There are times where you do big reveals because that information didn't actually need to be known by the audience. Like, whenever I say a reveal, I think a lot of people immediately their minds leap to the Sixth Sense style reveal, where there was something that was being sort of obfuscated the whole time, that all of a sudden the twist is shown and you're like, oh, I can't believe I didn't see that. That's not always how a reveal works. We get at the end of this, this past book, finding out that Jill and Jordan's dad is an alien, and like, we didn't need to know that information before. That's the kind of reveal that I mean, like, there's a reason to do it at that time. That's totally legit. But the dread thing, where somebody's up to no good, but you're not exactly sure why. I am not as interested in the dread where you know exactly what somebody plans on doing. I always like there to be a bit of a question. And I find this to be really effective, especially considering how like upbeat and excited about it all Jill is. She's just incredibly effervescent and just has a really like positive attitude about everything. And I just wonder a lot about what she's going to begin to figure out, because she's smart and she has this like, ability where she can see what's going on inside people's bodies. Is she going to be able to like look at him and realize that he's not human? Because that feels like a real danger. I don't know how much he is able to disguise himself. Is it just like a glamour? Or does his body actually change and he becomes human for the, all intents and purposes? I don't know what her reaction would be if she checked up on him and it turned out he wasn't. Would she think that he was just a metahuman? Or would she, I don't think most of us would jump to alien, right? Especially considering the revelation of metahumans. I think most of us would probably assume, oh, he's a metahuman too. But anyway, this is all just like me wondering how she's going to react. So, let's see. Oh, right. I forgot about this. So she is, first of all, she has a dog, named Master, what is it? Master Chief. That's right. He is a pug who keeps leaving hairs on her and on Brian. And she has this little, sort of vacuuming device that she uses to suck the hairs off of her before she goes into the lab. I really need one of these, guys. It's wild. I have one cat that's incredibly fat with very fluffy fur. And she really doesn't shed. She just has that thick ass fur all year. And then I have this other short hair who's very thin. And you run your hand down her back once and you've got a handful of fur. I don't know what the deal is with her. But I can't wear black, man. I'm wearing black right now. And if you could see it up close, you'd realize what a mistake it was. It's just all over there. So let's see. Jill looked out as they passed a very artsy-looking building that was nearly all windows. Each window was made of what appeared to be randomly sized and shaped green glass, some set at strange angles. The tone of each pane also appeared random, though when they caught the pale Seattle sunlight, the windows reflected a beautiful, scintillating pattern. So this is really interesting to me. When they go inside the building, there is the light plays in such a way on this sculpture in the center of the room so that it creates a DNA helix. I would love to see this, how it would work. That just sounds really cool. I like that idea. But first, we have this girl who greets them. Is it Karen? Yeah, Karen. This isn't... Has Jill met Brian's personal secretary? Because Jill has a really strong reaction to Karen. And I feel like if she ever met Brian's secretary, she would have a fucking heart attack, because that bitch is like all up in his business. She was very, very pushy about it too. I wonder what she thought about the fact that him and Jordan got married. Like, she clearly was hoping that she was going to be able to find like a way in before that happened, and clearly didn't. So, sucks to suck. But yeah, Jill, I love this so much. She gets out of the car, and this woman puts on a smile, it says, that dwarfed Jill's in radiance, but it was as manufactured as her breast implants, which actually was a pretty good turn of phrase that I liked. Taking a page out of Jordan's book, she donned a neutral expression and moved next to Brian. Jordan wasn't here to guard her territory, so Jill took it upon herself to do so. And she watches as this woman pins a ID badge to Brian's chest and leaves her hand on his chest for one extra moment. And this is one of those things where she steps in and is like, "Hey, have you met his wife, my sister, who's very tall and very, very threatening?" And Brian, as she walks away, after saying, "Yes, I have met her," and she's like, "Oh, good, I'll let her know you say hi," Brian turns to Jill and is like, "Nice." And I kept wondering, is there a way for a man to make it clear in a moment like that to a woman who is attempting to flirt like this in this subtle way that he is absolutely not fucking here for it without it being really rude? You know, because I was sort of like, it would be nice if Brian would just put up a boundary himself and Jill doesn't have to step in and do anything. But Brian's a diplomat. He's literally meant to be diplomatic. How do you distance yourself from somebody who's doing something like this without it feeling abrupt and rude? And I mean, as a woman, God knows it's hard enough, you know? But I feel like guys get a little bit more leeway when it comes to being rude and distant. And they've met clearly before, so he's had more than one opportunity to sort of give her with his body language a clear vibe that, nah, girl, not me. And I guess he hasn't. So what I'm saying is, Brian, how about you work on that? Because it feels like taking on this woman, taking on your assistant, secretary, whatever, and both of them really feeling free to encroach on you in a certain way, I feel like you need to establish a firmer boundary with these ladies. I think that's on you. I'm just saying. I don't want to victim blame here, but it's not like there's nothing to be done, you know? In the chat, let's see, Heather is saying, "Oh, Chief is based on my husband and Maya's first pug, R.I.P. Well, that's cute. She probably would have met Lena. Jill would have. Okay. The only thing I can think of is maybe taking a half step back and thanking her, but that's borderline, I think. Yeah. It all depends, too, on what their interactions were like before. So, let's see. Boop, boop, boop. This is when they go inside, and she realizes that this is a DNA model, and there's this applause from off screen, and then Dr. Spears walks in and says, "You're the first to have made that realization in a long time." Let's see what you make of this one. Karen. The blonde assistant produced a small remote from her pocket and pressed the center button. Along the walls, the glass started to go from green to black, turning day to night. Along the edge of the marble floor, soft yellow lights projected a faint light so that the four could still see one another. After a moment, there was a distinct and throaty hum, and the entire room filled with floating orbs of light. There were 5 distinct shades of green. The motes of light danced around one another like a swarm of fireflies. In a few seconds, the spheres began to bump into one another and adhere against their new companions, and formed a ladder of light that stretched all the way to the room's ceiling. With wonder in her voice, Jill answered, "It's a model of bee DNA." Again, Spears smiled. "Excellent. You definitely know your structures." So, this is when this clearly impresses him, but it's hard for me to tell how much it's actually impressing him and how much he knows what she is or who she is, and he is just doing what he needs to do to get her in his clutches. He's so charming all the time. He's very good at acting the part. And I can't tell if he's truly impressed or just trying to stroke her ego, you know? So let's see. Let's enlighten that eager mind of yours. Just remember that the NDA you signed. I'm very familiar with your sister Ryan's genius, and I don't want her suddenly starting up a competing company. See, this is what makes me think he knows. He knows everything about everybody. How would he not know? He's got to. So, the next 2 hours were spent touring laboratories so advanced that even Jill, with her innate grasp of biological sciences, was left in awe. Dozens of genetics technicians, sorry, I don't know how I just said assistants when that word is not there, sat at desks using holographically projected displays to do their work. Jill marveled at how quickly and easily they were passing ideas back and forth amongst themselves. She noted that none of them paused to speak to the small tour group unless Spears specifically asked them a question. It was sort of odd, but she played it off as professionals being on their best behavior for the boss. Okay, so what's that about? Are they real? We don't ever hear about them going up to these people and shaking their hands. I don't imagine that Elgin Spears has an entire building that's empty and just filled with projections of fucking, fake human beings going about their tasks like some sort of weird Disney ride. But I can't imagine what an explanation of that would be. Is it that that he's normally really strict and wouldn't want them to stop what they're doing? Or, I don't know, that just feels significant, and I'm curious about it. She found herself staring at the cards she held in both hands as Brian drove them back towards Ryan's East Side home. Spontaneously, Jill did a little dance in her seat and grinned. And she mentions at this point, of course she's excited about this, but she's like, oh, he's really hot too. And Brian's like, dude, he's old for you. And she's like, I get to make my own choices in that. And he's like, okay, yeah, you do. But he in particular is known to be like a womanizer. So just tread cautiously there. And I was like, Brian. Brian just doesn't know young women, because saying something like this is the exact sort of thing that for a particular personality type would be intriguing. You tell a girl that he's a hit it and quit it type, then depending on the type of girl, she begins to do the whole well, maybe I can get him to drop those other women. If I'm good enough, I can change him. I can make him not do that anymore. And it's seen as more of a weird personal accomplishment on her part, if she can. Just, Brian, I get what you're trying to do, and I completely appreciate it. I know, I get it. But also, maybe don't. Jill just is so contrary so much of the time, It feels like she's just I, being a contrary, defiant sort of person, sympathize greatly just with the whole, you tell me in one thing and I'm going to try and push it and see if you're really right about that. So let's see. Learn from him, but keep it professional. He usually plays things close to the vest. I've never seen him warm up to someone so fast. Whatever you did, you impressed him with more than your physical charms. And again, yeah, but I bet she did. I bet she did. So, chapter 3, we go to Jordan, aka Viper, in mid-mission. She's literally plummeting through the air as this begins. And as she is heading down, she's like got these anti-gravity like propulsion units that are built into the suit she's wearing. And they don't seem to be functioning the way that they are meant to. So she winds up like crashing through, and like she was going to be going through the ceiling anyway, but she winds up crashing through in a way that isn't how this was all planned. And we find out pretty quickly that this is an Imagine building. I am desperate to know what's going on here, because later on, it's Ethan who's talking about it with like the mysterious stranger whose name we don't get. And he is saying how this just was too easy. This doesn't make sense. And I'm like, was there an attempt here to like make Jordan show up? Like, what is going on here? This feels orchestrated somehow. We get a little description of her suit. Green on black with ribbed padding along the legs and neck. The suit was constructed out of artificial muscles called myomers that were designed to absorb impacts and bleed the kinetic energy off through the suit's surface area, though now it was absorbing the wind buffets and keeping her body heat regulated. It was an odd sensation when it was in use, but Viper could attest to the durability. Despite the protective qualities, it didn't stop everything, which meant she had to wear several hard armor sections made from a woven polymer. An armored corset, boots, shoulders, knees, and bracers rounded out the protective attachments. Jordan had a feeling she would be very pleased to have them all, sooner rather than later. So this is when the low altitude warning starts on her mask. And the pods that are meant to be sort of, they begin stuttering and she's dropping faster than she should be and gets a heat warning. And I wasn't clear on the heat warning. Is that a result of the malfunctioning pods? Or is this supposed to be due to the speed that she's moving at? I'm not entirely sure how this works. The controller's voice rose in pitch as he advised Jordan of a potential burnout in the number 1 and 2 pods. So I think that's meant to be that the heat is from the burnout of them. But yeah, that is, I guess, going to have to be replaced. Oops. So she drops in, and I really enjoy this. These guys are taken completely by surprise. They did not expect somebody to come flying in through the fucking ceiling. Viper quickly drew a bead on each of them and sub-vocalized a command to the weapons. High stun. Neither of the elegant black pistols made a sound as they responded by altering their power output and frequency. The Justifiers, as they were officially called, each fired once as Viper depressed the triggers. Look, I'm going to say it. Don't be mad, but I hate that name. The Justifiers feels like a network vigilante TV show. I don't like it. And I'm annoyed with Lyndon for coming up with this. Like, there's no need for this kind of name. You don't have to do that. Just call them, like, does he think people are going to be discussing these weapons amongst themselves, and so they need a name that sounds sort of like it's rationalizing something? That's what it feels like. It feels like it draws more attention to itself because it's attempting to do something in a PR sense. If you just called them, like, you know, subduing like pistols or something, I just feel like that is less I don't really know the word I want here, but just trying less hard, you know? Pretentious feels like it means a slightly different thing, but it's as close as I can get to what I mean. So yeah, and he mentions them later, and I was like, oh, it was your idea? Come on, man. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the justifiers, I'm not using that word. I'll figure something else out, but I'm not doing it. They launched a bolt of emerald energy from the end of the black polycarbonate weapon. The bolts hissed as they crossed the distance faster than any bullet, and when they struck the men, their nervous systems overloaded. Like sacks of potatoes, the men dropped into an unconscious heap on the rooftop. So this is a part of their whole deal, right? Is that they're trying not to just fucking kill people, because that doesn't look great, which I understand, and that's admirable, you know? Like, as we find out, some of these people don't necessarily know what it is they're getting involved with. So even though it's easy to just be like, well, they're criminals, like, yeah, you don't just deserve to die because you're a criminal, like, contrary to how much of our world functions. But they did take people hostage and maybe would have murdered them. I don't know about these guys. Maybe they do deserve to die, but I don't know. So Viper drew her arms up and crossed them over her chest just before impact. She crashed feet first through the glass, shooting into the open-air interior of Imagine's London office. Amidst a sparkling shower of glass, Viper continued her downward descent. All around her, the shattered remnants of the skylight twinkled like 1,000 diamonds in the building's artificial light. So, this isn't the same building that Jill was at, right? Because this isn't the green artsy windows. This is like the central, like, business building. Oh God. How did I not catch that? Heather says this is in London. Jill was in Seattle. I can't believe I didn't notice that Jill was in Seattle. Somehow I completely overlooked that. That's my bad. Viper fired again in mid-fall, her arms extended forward as she took 2 men on the uppermost walk. I have a question here because he goes back and forth between calling her Viper and calling her Jordan. And I'm curious if there's a reason for the times that he switches. Like, is there a particular vibe to her actions that at certain times he's like, I'm going to say Viper here because this is part of the mission. I'm going to say Jordan here because this is like her personal thought. Or is it just sort of meant to give us the sense that they're the same person and just get us used to that? Because in this like scene, it goes back and forth between Jordan and Viper. It starts off with like rushing wind that whipped by Viper's body as she plummeted. And I'm trying to see because here it is. It says, the voices seemed very small and far away, lost in the roar of the rushing wind that whipped by Viper's body as she plummeted. The controller back at headquarters, who was providing status updates via Jordan's earpiece, sounded as calm as could be. So, at first, because it jumps right back to calling her Jordan, I thought these were 2 different people. And this happens a few times where it's like Viper in the one sentence and then the very next sentence he calls her Jordan again. And like, you know, I fucking put it together eventually that it's the same person, but I was just wondering if there was like a specific reason for that. Heather says, generally if she's in costume / uniform, she's Viper. Okay. I mean, she's in costume for this, but he does both back and forth anyway. But yeah, it doesn't matter. I was just sort of wondering if there was something that he had in mind when he was doing that. So this like bit where she falls and she's in a T position, so both her arms are out and she's just shooting at everybody. These are like the very cinematic moments where you're like, I can absolutely picture this. You know, this is the sort of like Black Widow kind of incredibly over the top badass moment. And she was still spinning slowly as she came down, her mind focusing past the vertigo to target more of the black-clad men. And it looks at first as if like, oh, okay, all the bad guys are in black. And later on, once she gets like to the ground, they're mentioning on the comm, by the way, there's going to be more of them than we thought at first. And she's like, cool, great. And there's this fight back and forth. And then I think is it Douglas who turns up and he says, you missed one. Without warning, Viper thrust her arm behind her back and fired into the middle of the hostages. The hissing green energy bolt from her pistol caught a well-dressed man in a gray suit straight in the chest and crumpled him. The hostages were too shocked to scream, their horrified expressions fixed on the man who had been hiding in their midst as they scrambled away from him as if he were on fire. So apparently he was part of the bad guys, but he was like meant to just look like he was one of the hostages, which I'm sure is something that's done in these kinds of ops, but for me feels like a completely genius move. That's one of those things that's like very obvious probably to any professional, but to me as just a random nobody, I'm like, oh my God, that's so smart. And you know, it's probably like not that smart. It's probably pretty standard, but I was just like, wow, yeah, he's not in the same outfit as the other guys. He's in amongst the hostages. So you could just like grab up another one and pull them into a room if you need to like, you know, up things, escalate. And, when he asks her, how'd you pick him out? She points out that he has a Glock in one hand, and she says, and the fact that he didn't scream with the rest of the hostages when I downed his friends. So what I like to imagine, talking about this whole like entrance that she makes being very Black Widow, obviously Black Widow doesn't have this like slow down time power that Jordan has, but I'd like to imagine if we were watching this on screen, the camera would go into slow-mo and pan, and we would notice that there would be one dude amongst the hostages who wasn't screaming. We would get the same sense of it as she does, that something's not right over there, you know? The glass doors at the front of the building burst open as 24 armed men from the Metropolitan Police Service's Counter-Terrorism Command, that's a long fucking name, poured into the lobby. The SO-15 officers kept their weapons held to their shoulders in the high ready position as they moved into the building and split off into their respective teams. Oh my God. I forgot that Douglas's code name is Cronus. He says, I really need a new name. It sounds like a bloody watch or a condom. Honestly, what I fucking first thought of... Oh, it's Tristan's name. Okay, thank you, Heather. I thought of Cronut. I really, like, you know, I'm just a girl who likes a pastry. What can I say? So that was the first thing that I thought of. And I was just like, yeah, I mean, I know that Cronus is an actual, like, you know, but definitely thought of Cronut. That's where my priorities lie. That's all I'm going to say about that. So I do think he probably could stand to get a different name. I would like to know how hard it is for people to like change their code name. Like, does the whole team get irritated about it? Does everybody go, oh, now I have to relearn it? Come on, man. Do people accidentally call him the wrong name for a long time after? Or is everybody such a fucking like completely advanced professional that they can just instantly switch it over and be like, yeah, no, it's fine. So Heather in the chat says, that reminds me, I'm going to send you an email because in a later chapter, one of the characters just spews a whole boatload of abbreviations and stuff. Okay. Good to know. It's always good to have a little reference sheet. So Maxim's team has secured the target floor, and Stryker reports that they've disarmed the device in the garage sublevels. No friendly casualties. The old man wants you to remain on site and collect intel before the Met takes anything off premises. And this is when we go back to Ethan, and he's watching it, and he's just like, this doesn't fucking feel right. There's like no metahumans here. What is going on? And there's some dude in the corner who we don't ever get told who he is. And I don't know if this, like, there's a whole thing with shadow. And I'm assuming that's like a metahuman power. But Ethan's talking with, Ethan's an alien also, right? Ethan and Jordan's dad are from the same alien crew that is in opposition to the type of alien that Lyndon and Dr. Spears are. But does Ethan know that Lyndon is an alien? Or are they hiding from each other? I have to imagine they know each other are. Like one alien knows another. But let's see. So this guy says, your people are good, but you have them taking a lot of risk. Do you think there's anything they're going to find here that justifies them doing this? McIntyre shook his head. No, whoever is running the metas is smarter than we thought. These men were a diversion. They were good, but not good enough to convince me they were there for a serious purpose. They're throwaways. The ransom they asked for doesn't seem like a large enough amount of money to undertake such a poorly planned operation in the middle of downtown London. That suggests they were promised something substantial enough for them to risk being captured, or they expected reinforcements that never came. Which, I gotta say, I really feel for these guys, and they're very lucky that this crew has decided to try using, like, non-lethal force, because imagine being told that you're going to get backup. Don't worry, guys. We're sending in these metahumans, and they're total badasses, and they'll take over this after you're done. And then just nobody shows up. Like, oh my God, I'd be so livid. Ugh, poor dudes. Like, not really, you know, like, I don't know. I don't know their circumstances, but I felt for them in that moment. That description just made them seem so pitiful. And the shadow says, my people are still coming up dry. I'm beginning to doubt that the escapees are in the States. And Ethan says, escapees? That presumes they had a hand in their own release. They didn't. They were taken by Trechek's men, and they don't work for free. What are they talking about? I'm not supposed to know, right? I just want to make sure that I didn't miss anything. But evidently a fucking group of what I'm assuming are metahumans, like, just vanished, and they weren't supposed to be going anywhere. But Trechek's dudes are still out there. Trechek's dead, but his guys, you know, I don't know. I think that we established in the last book that Trechek is the only one who could make more of his own dudes, right? Oh, right, he's not dead. I forgot. They're going to keep him prisoner. So did he get out? Or, because he was, like, really badly injured. But he also has, like, superhuman healing powers, so I don't know how fast that works. Yeah, he says they were taken by Trechek's men, and they don't work for free. They've also had nearly a year to dig in. You and your people are going to have to be more persistent. The Shadow's frown was obvious. You may be the acting head of the chamber now, but don't forget you and I are the same rank. Cassidy never took the leaps of logic that you prefer. His assumptions always had some tangible fact to support them. And Ethan gets real mad and says that Cassidy's out and has turned his back on the mission. And this dude is like, come on, he definitely hasn't. Like, he may not be doing the things in the way that you want him to be doing them, but he's fucking out there, a factor. There's something going on with him. The fact that you've brought his daughter into this will only increase his impact on our mission, not lessen it. Sorry guys, Heather is saying the escapees they're talking about are from the Dunlevy. I forgot about wait, the Dunlevy is the huge ocean liner, right? That they made their first attack on. So there were metahumans that were on there that they were smuggling. So they got those people off of that ship after all? Oh, so we thought that was like a massive failure, but it wasn't. their attack on the ship, I mean. How did they manage that, though? Because Trechek, I thought he said himself when we were, like, in his POV that they didn't get who they intended to get from it. Or did he just not realize that they had managed, or... I'm confused here, clearly. Let's see. Heather says, it was mentioned in the debrief later that they took a bunch of people in cryostasis. God, I don't remember that. That's my bad. Okay. Thank you, Heather. Let's see. The humans have a saying, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You should remember that when it comes to the Law family. Cassidy's clan is tight-knit, loyal. Even if you've convinced Shauna to take Cassidy's place in the chamber, you would do well to remember how that family works. And McIntyre doesn't seem that worried about this. He says his wife understands our people's goals supersede our personal desires. And I wonder, like, we haven't really gotten much about her mom, so I'm very curious to see more of her and see the way her attitude is different. She's one of us, the Shadow hissed. So is Cassidy. Remember that, Ethan. We don't turn on our own. The darkness that had been creeping closer had stopped just before it covered him and was beginning to recede back into the corner of the room. So what is this guy? How? Is he, like, teleporting via this shadow? I'm very curious about this. McIntyre rubbed his chin. Cassidy, you've grown weak. You may have left the war, but it hasn't left you. One way or another, your bloodline will see it through. And then he picks up the phone and says, Paula, ring Brian Agincourt for me. Tell him I want to make a donation to his foundation. So does he think he's going to be able to influence Jordan via doing something for Brian? I don't know if that's going to work, man. I don't know what you think you're doing. I don't know what his angle is here, though. So then we go to chapter 4, and I'm a little bit over time here, but I've talked about the whole like thing with the names that happens later this chapter already a little bit. But what we get first here is Chance, who is showing in this like video footage that they have. And I don't know where he got this, let's see. There was an image of one of the terrorists they had captured holding his heavily modified Heckler and Koch. Is it Koch? Koch? Heckler and Koch? It's Koch. Come on. It was a typical tough guy pose that some mercenaries like to take to show to their friends at the pub. The higher end types weren't stupid enough to do that, and the fact that this man had a cell phone stashed on him during a sensitive operation spoke to a lack of professionalism. So, is this supposed to be that a guy took a selfie at like an operation that he was doing? Or that somebody else had... Oh my God. Heather says he had his buddy take a tough guy pic of him. What a fucking idiot. I love it though, because this is exactly this is the shit that I point at whenever people are like, there's a massive conspiracy about whatever. No, because then you have dicks like this screwing up the works. No, there's no worldwide conspiracy because nobody's good at that. If you want a conspiracy, you have 3 people involved, and that's all you got. Max, like, you know, come on. So he uses the angle and the sight of like 3 pillars in the background and manages to figure out where in the city this guy is, the angle the sun would have been hitting at the time it was taken, and therefore the positioning of the building in reference to those pillars. Overall, he really manages to like zero in on probably where these guys' headquarters are, which is truly so embarrassing. The top of the O2. If I take the 3D model of the dome and adjust the light, we'll see exactly which towers they are. The O2 had once been known as the Millennium Dome, a failed experiment that had been built for the Festival of Britain. Is this a real place, Heather? I didn't look it up or anything, but I was curious about it. She says it is. I'm curious. I would like to see what that looks like. I have to check it out. Looks like we may have something of use after all, doesn't it, Colonel? And Tristan is just sort of like meditative. And finally, when they come up with like an 88%, I think, probability that they're in the right place, that's when Tristan is like, all right, that's actionable. And get me orbital surveillance. I want thermal scans of the entire area. And then we jump over to Briar, and they're talking about the names. And he does not like the name Pendragon. That makes us sound like a bunch of Nances. That doesn't inspire fear at all. It doesn't scare anyone. And they all basically are like, that's not what we're supposed to be doing. We're not supposed to scare people. And yeah, personally, like, you know, Pendragon was Uther's last name, who was the father of King Arthur. I like it. I like the historical nature of it. I like the sort of like, you know, it's specific to their country and mythology. And I don't know. I think it's cool. I like it. And I like that it's not meant to be super aggressive. It's not like a sports team name, you know, because a lot of the names that they were sort of bouncing around did sort of sound like they could be sports teams. So let's see. What are the other ones that they're talking about? I'm trying to find the ones that they say could potentially, yeah, Jordan says it's culturally applicable, it's inspiring, and it doesn't sound like some Black Ops unit. It would even give us a symbol to use, which is a good point. And there's this bit here where Briar gets real snarky about the fact that, of course, Jordan agrees with Douglas. And I'm like, oh my God, Brian, just grow up. Honestly, get over it. And let's see. Chance put in long shot. I suggested the watch. Long shot, don't like it. I get why you would like it, Chance. It suits you beautifully. Don't care for it, though. It makes it sound like, well, who knows if they'll be able to handle it. Like, that's not the vibe you want to go with. The watch could be good, but it's too generic, you know? But yeah, anyway, so this is when Lyndon comes in and talks about how this is going to be like incredibly important. And this is when he said, it's why I made the justifiers to replace your normal sidearms. And I'm like, oh no, that was you. God damn it. There's been a lot of fear generated by the revelation of metahumanity's existence. We're only a year into events that will forever change this world, and fearmongers are coming out of the woodwork. Every step must be sure, every action pure. Each of you must separate yourselves from the crimson sharks of the world in everything you do, or else humanity will seek to eradicate everyone like you. And Jordan is kind of like, God damn, Lyndon, can you, like, lighten up a little? Like, she's not really, but she's just noting how the whole energy of the room shifts. And she's like, he really fucking does that to people. And this is where it says, like, fearful reactions were all over the internet as well as on the news. The papers were running metahuman stories every day and slanted them to cause fear in order to prop up their flagging sales. And I want to see this stuff, you know? And like I said, maybe we will, but I wish it was more front loaded. And also, God, it is the fact that the news is a for-profit business is just a real problem. Like, because of capitalism, there's just no other way that this can work, really. But it is just inherently a bad thing, and it's frustrating. This is why I need to, like, start doing a monthly donation to the Marshall Project or something. So this is when we find out that, like, every country has basically kind of come out and admitted that they have metahuman, like, ops. And everybody is, of course, like, fucking, these people are just lying to us, our government conspiracies. And they're like, yeah, whatever. Like, honestly, that's kind of how you have to be. Just like, grow up. Yeah, there's a conspiracy. We have people. And then we have, let's see, they all agree finally on Pendragon, except, of course, for Briar. But Briar basically, Lyndon's sort of reprimand it's not really a reprimand directed specifically at him, but it feels like it is a little bit, and it does seem to land. But it ends with all of them talking about going out, and Douglas is getting to go, like, this was part of the reward, I think, for his name getting picked. Is that right? Was there a prize for? I feel like there's something mentioned at one point. Oh no, Jordan and Douglas go to the States for her husband's big soiree. And Laird asks Douglas, "Who are you taking?" And he's like, "I'm not taking anybody. I'm going stag so that I can pick up somebody." Okay, so that's the reward he gets. He gets to go to one of the galas for fundraising. Gotcha. Okay, cool. And Douglas is like, "I would like to, like, wear my uniform instead of a tux, though." And Jordan's like, black tie. Chance dashed into the room, interrupting the bantering. "I've got him!" Aftermath. Do we know this guy? His heat sig is in the warehouse the Doc and I found. The director wants us ready to deploy in 20 minutes. I want to know what this guy is, that his heat signature is so, like, particular that they know it's him from that. Because that feels like he must be a real weirdo. All right, I am so over time. Oh my God. I really have to wrap. Thank you very much, Heather, for commissioning this. I'm sorry. See, this I underread and I went fucking almost 15 minutes over. This is what I get. All right, guys. I will be seeing you soon with a new episode. Thank you, Heather. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.